This is a story about how my sister faked an illness to ruin my life. And I proved to everyone that I wasn't crazy. They called me a shadow when I was silent, and a liar when I spoke. I'll start with my childhood, with the first crack that no one noticed at the time. I always looked at Haley as someone I wanted to be. She was only 3 years older, but the difference seemed like a whole generation. She knew how to talk to adults, how to keep people's attention in a group, even how to laugh so that everyone would look only at her. And I stood by and caught the crumbs of attention that fell from her table of brilliance. Our family loved to compare us, not out of malice, just because that's how it's done. Haley is charismatic, my aunt would say. Emily, you should open up a little, not just your books. Mom always added. But Emily is diligent. And it sounded like consolation, not a compliment. As if diligent meant not like that. I wasn't angry. Not then, anyway. I wanted us to be friends. When she drew, I sat next to her. When she participated in a school competition, I signed up for the next one. I just wanted to be closer, to keep up. I remember the day when I first felt that something was wrong between us. I was drawing for a school exhibition, the sea and a boat. I left the drawing on the windowsill to dry. When I came back, there were black spots on the paper, as if someone had deliberately smeared paint on it. I stood there with that sheet of paper in my hands and didn't even cry. I just couldn't understand why. Mom said that maybe the cat had knocked it over. But we never had a cat. Then there was a school project. I made a model of a volcano, and she made a model of the solar system. The next morning, my volcano didn't erupt, someone had replaced the baking soda and vinegar with water. Everyone applauded her model. Maybe you shouldn't have told me how you do it, she said. I took it as a joke. At the time, I thought it was just childish whims. When she jokingly called me a shadow, I was even happy. It's cool and safe in the shadows. But with each victory, Haley became colder. My support annoyed her, as if I were mocking her. She would push me when no one was looking or whisper that I was meddling where I didn't belong. Christmas was the most striking example. My grandmother gave me a set of paints, and Haley got a camera. She came up to me and said, "They even give you paints because no one believes you can paint anything interesting." So I hid the gift in the closet. Not because I was ashamed, I just didn't want to give her another reason to be angry. When I was 11, I learned to keep quiet. Because any little thing, a new notebook, praise from a teacher, could be a reason for retribution. But I still believed that someday she would accept me. That summer we rode bikes. Hers broke, and she asked for mine. I gave it to her without hesitation. She rode ahead, turned sharply, and threw the handlebars. The bike fell, and the frame cracked. "I'm sorry," she said. I lost my balance. I didn't know then that this crack would be the first real one. From that day on, I stopped telling her about my joys. I began to learn to be silent. In the evening, my mother asked why I was so quiet. I replied that I was just tired. How can you explain how you feel when you lose faith in someone you love? That was my childhood. For a long time, I thought it was normal, sisterly jokes, petty quarrels. But now, remembering those ruined drawings and the broken bike, I understand. That was when the shadow began, which over the years would turn into darkness. High school began without any expectations. I just wanted peace. After that summer with the bike, I learned to keep my distance from Haley. We didn't fight anymore, because I stopped competing. She had her friends, I had my books and the lab. But the more I kept quiet, the more she noticed it. In my first year of high school, I won a regional physics competition. Nothing spectacular, just a diploma on the school's honor board. But for me, it was proof that I could do it. In the evening, I put the diploma in a drawer. I wanted to avoid unnecessary comments. But my mom, of course, told all our relatives. We had a family dinner on the weekend. Dad raised his glass to Emily. And Haley sat next to him, smiling and swallowing water as if it were something bitter. Emily is a genius, Dad said. No, she replied. I'm just lucky. And the competition is weak. The silence at the table cracked like glass. From that day on, I realized that every attempt I made to stand out was like a challenge to her. She was a star at school, theater, cheerleading, parties. Her photos were on the walls, her name was mentioned at every assembly. Mine were only on the honor roll. Once, during a group project in biology, she took my calculations, changed the title, and signed her name. I found out about it when the teacher announced, "Haley's work is the best this year." After class, I approached her. "Why did you do that?" "Because I would have done better anyway," she replied calmly. "I just didn't have enough time." I didn't complain. Because I knew no one would believe me. She knew how to look sincere. From then on, I worked in silence. I wrote lab reports at night while others watched TV shows or hung out. Haley lived in her own show. She needed the stage even when there was no audience. And if I got attention, she had to take it away. Once she took my science model, which I had left in the garage, and brought it to school. I was helping my sister, but it turned out even better than I expected, she told the teachers. At home, I just whispered, "Don't take my things." "You weren't using them," she replied without looking up. There was always something hidden in her voice, the calm before the storm. When I turned 16, the school nominated me for a technical college scholarship. The tuition was fully paid, my chance to break free. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but my mom found the letter and, of course, told everyone. At dinner, everyone raised a toast. Everyone except Haley. "That's cool," she said. "I hope you can handle the competition." The next day at school, some of her friends started joking. "So, is our nerd already preparing a place in the campus basement?" I knew where they got that from. I could already see it, the closer I got to success, the harder she pushed. But I wasn't going to stop. Not because of her, because of myself. At the prom, she won the title of Miss School. They hugged her, photographed her, applauded her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt relieved, let it be her night. But when I came home, I saw a torn letter for the scholarship committee on the table. The draft I had written by hand. There was no doubt who had done it. I taped the sheets back together and rewrote it. No screaming, no tears. I just decided that if she wanted to ruin my future, she would have to try very hard. At that time, I didn't know how far she would go. I remember that morning in detail. The sun was shining right into the window, and I was drinking coffee from a mug that was chipped around the rim but was my favorite. On the table were notebooks, a flash drive, printouts, my usual mess, in which I knew the place of everything. The mailman had left an envelope while I was in the yard. It was white with the university's blue logo. I stood there for a few seconds without touching it, afraid to open it. It was the same place where my broken bike had once lain. And I thought, history likes to repeat itself. Inside was a letter. "Dear Emily Grayson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been provisionally accepted into the program." I read it 3 times. Then I just sat down on the porch, holding the envelope in my hands. My heart was beating not with joy, but with tension, like after finishing a marathon, when you don't have the strength to rejoice. My mom was the first to find out. She found the envelope while cleaning, and her scream echoed throughout the house. My dad ran out of the garage, his hands still covered in dirty grease. He didn't even have time to wipe his hands, he just picked me up and spun me around in the air. Mom took pictures, laughed, cried. "You did what everyone else only dreamed of." Haley came out of her room later. She smiled, evenly, tensely. "Wow. Congratulations. Is this the same university that didn't accept you last year?" "They didn't accept me then because I didn't apply," I replied. "Oh, right," she nodded. "Just asking." Mom took a picture of the 2 of us, 2 sisters, 1 future. In the photo, I'm smiling, and she's looking at the camera slightly to the side, through it. In the evening, we celebrated with pizza, soda, and Dad's toasts. Haley left early, citing a headache. I didn't pay any attention. At the time, I still believed it was just jealousy, not a threat. The next few days passed in euphoria. The university sent a letter with admission details, forms to sign, and an estimated arrival date. I printed everything out, put it in a separate folder, made copies on a flash drive and in the cloud. After my laptop broke, I didn't take any chances. Every morning, my mom would say, "This is your chance, Em. We're proud of you." And I could see that this time they were truly happy. But that's when Haley started acting strangely. She came home late, hid her phone, deleted her search history, and disappeared for hours without explanation. Once, I went into her room to borrow a stapler and saw printouts with medical terms on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Just a project," she replied without looking up. "For college." "But you didn't get in." "I'm just reading." I left. At the time, it seemed like a minor thing. That evening, she said she was having health problems. "It's nothing serious," she said calmly. "Just some strange symptoms. The doctor recommends tests." Mom immediately became concerned. She bought vitamins and called doctors. Dad checked the insurance. And gradually, the whole focus of the house shifted. From my letter to her diagnosis. When the first results came in, she said it was immune deviation, possibly the onset of a rare syndrome. My parents were in shock. "But you look healthy," my mother whispered. "Yes, it's an insidious disease," she replied without batting an eye. Since then, all the talk has been about her. About doctors, diet, treatment. My envelope from the university was still hanging on the refrigerator, but no one looked at it anymore. I wasn't jealous. At least not right away. I just felt the air around me getting heavier. A few days later, my mother asked me to vacate my room so that Haley could rest. I nodded, packed my things, and took my textbooks to the small closet where the vacuum cleaner used to be. Haley was lying on my bed, pale, with her phone in her hands. "If you need anything, let me know," I said from the doorway. "Yes," she replied without looking up. "Please close the door. The light is bothering me." When I left, the house became quiet. But not peaceful, more like frozen. Like before a storm, when the thunder hasn't yet rolled, but you can already hear it in the air. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. My backpack was standing nearby, and a white envelope was sticking out of it, the same one. I looked at it and thought for the first time. What if she can't stand me going on without her? At that moment, I didn't know that her next step would turn everything upside down. The first week of her illness passed in complete tension. Mom hardly left her side. Haley's room was lit by a night lamp, soft music played, and the smell of medicine and lavender filled the air. I wasn't invited in. Sometimes I would stop at the door and ask if I could help. "No, thank you," Mom would reply. "She's sleeping right now." The whole house revolved around her well-being, what she ate, whether she coughed, whether she had a headache. Dad installed a humidifier. Mom bought a white robe, so that Haley would feel that she was being cared for professionally. And I quietly carried plates, washed dishes, and tried not to get in the way. I was really worried in the early days. She looked exhausted, sometimes sitting on the bed, clutching her temples as if in pain. I brought her tea. She thanked me. And then, when Mom entered the room, she would clutch her stomach and groan. It confused me. Maybe she really was in pain? I didn't know. A week later, a doctor who was a family friend came to see us. She talked to Haley for a long time and looked at her test results. Then she went into the kitchen and quietly said to my mother, "It's nothing serious. Maybe it's stress." But the very next day, Haley wrote a long post on social media about a difficult trial and a struggle that no one sees. Underneath it were hundreds of comments, words of support, emojis, and prayers. She replied to each one. When I saw this post, I felt a chill. In the photo, she looked touching, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and her gaze empty. The caption read, "Even the strong break when their bodies betray them." I wasn't in that text. We had all disappeared, only she remained, the heroine of her own drama. Mom showed me the comments from our relatives. "Look how supportive everyone is. We have a wonderful girl." I nodded. That evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with a book when Haley quietly came downstairs. She looked completely healthy, her hair was down, she was wearing light pajamas, and she even had mascara on her eyelashes. "How are you?" I asked. "A little better," she replied. "Just don't tell Mom you saw me up, okay? She panics when I move." "Okay." I didn't realize then that she wasn't just lying, she was setting a trap. The next morning, Mom found empty painkiller boxes in the medicine cabinet. "She took more than she should have," she sobbed. "We need to get her to the hospital right away." I rushed to the room, and there was Haley, sitting calmly, listening to music. "I didn't take them. I just left the old boxes," she said. But my mother had already called the doctor. That day, we were driven around to clinics. Haley looked scared, obedient, almost saintly the whole time. And I looked like a traitor who hadn't noticed the trouble. In the evening, Dad slammed the garage door and said to me, "You see that your sister is sick, but you stand aside. You're smart. Help, don't judge." I nodded. Because what can you say when you're blamed for someone else's movie? Every day, the performance became more perfect. Haley kept a diary of her symptoms, talked about her bouts of weakness, wrote about the world shrinking to the size of a pillow. She already had her audience, friends, relatives, acquaintances who wrote to her. "You inspire us. Hang in there, fighter. You are the strongest person I know." Sometimes she read these comments aloud. And I stood nearby and felt my voice disappear. I was almost gone from the house, physically I was there, but I was like a shadow. Mom said Haley needed silence. Silence became the norm for her and a punishment for me. One evening, I overheard her saying to my mother, "I think Em doesn't like me. She's angry because I'm not as smart as she is." My mother replied with something reassuring, but I had heard enough. That was when I first thought, maybe I really am losing my footing. Because everything I saw sounded absurd, but to them, it seemed true. And at that moment, a thought flashed through my mind, so quiet that I was frightened by it myself. What if it never stops? Over time, it began to seem to me that the house had changed color. Not the walls, the air. Everything became gray, heavy, as if suspicion had settled in it. Haley hardly ever left her room. Mom said the doctors were looking for the cause. Dad muttered that her body is young, it will pass. But the only thing that passed was my patience. One evening, I heard my mom talking on the phone. "Yes, my daughter is weak, but she's holding on. My younger daughter is helping as much as she can." I stood in the doorway and listened. "My younger daughter is helping as much as she can." It sounded like I had been given a role as an extra in someone else's movie. At school, I became the one with the sick sister. My friends asked cautiously, "How is she?" I replied that I didn't know. And I saw sympathy in their eyes. For her, not for me. One morning, my mother asked me to buy some medicine. The prescription had names I didn't recognize. When I got to the pharmacy, the pharmacist looked surprised. "These are psychotropic drugs. They are not prescribed without a diagnosis." I was confused. "Maybe it's a mistake," I whispered. When I brought the medicine home, Haley took the bag and smiled. "Thank you, sis. You're always so obedient." That evening, my mother said I should be more gentle. She senses when you look at her judgmentally. It hurts her. I just keep quiet. That's what's scary. Silence is the worst. Silence. The same thing I had been taught to do for years. Now it had become another crime. I began to doubt myself. Or maybe I really am cold? Maybe I'm jealous? When everyone around you repeats it long enough, you start to hear their voices instead of your own thoughts. One day, my mom showed me a photo that Haley posted on social media. She is lying on the bed, pale, wrapped in a blanket, with my coat on her chest. The caption read, "Thank you to my sister for the warmth. Even when she doesn't understand how much I'm suffering." The comments were hundreds of hearts and hang in there. I looked at that photo and didn't recognize myself in that warm sister. I wasn't in it, only her version of me. That evening, I tried to talk to her. "Haley, why are you writing this? It's not true." She turned her head. "People only see what they want to see. Sometimes it's better not to spoil the picture." "But you're lying. You just don't understand." Her voice was full of confidence. As if she were really the victim and I was the persecutor. The next morning, my mother called me into the kitchen. "Haley is crying. She says you yelled at her." "I didn't yell." She wouldn't lie. "Mom, I just..." "Enough, Emily. She's sick, and you're being cruel." I stood there holding my coffee cup, watching the foam tremble beneath my fingers. I wanted to scream, to justify myself, to prove myself. But what? When everything around you is rewritten by someone else, your words sound like noise. That night, I sat in the dark for a long time. A message flashed on the screen. "How can you do this to your own sister?" From a mutual friend I hadn't even seen in months. I opened Haley's page and saw a new post. "Some people are close, but not with you. Some bear your surname, but not your heart." Something clicked in my chest. Not anger, emptiness. So deep that even thoughts couldn't penetrate it. I realized, they were erasing me. Slowly, carefully, but surely. And if I didn't do something now, I would disappear completely. After the insults and fake posts, I thought it couldn't get any worse. But Haley always found a way to make it even more painful. One morning at school, everyone looked at me like I was a stranger. When I opened my locker, there was a piece of paper on the door. "Don't touch, it might be contagious." Someone was laughing nearby. I tried to tear off the paper, my hands were shaking. After class, Ms. Nelson, my physics teacher, stopped me. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "Emily, I'm sorry, but we've received a complaint." "What complaint?" "They say your university documents may have been forged." The words fell like ice on my chest. I stood there, not understanding where it came from. She handed me a printout, an anonymous letter, and signed. The text was short: "Student Emily Grayson has sent false materials to the university, copied from someone else's work. Please verify." The world around me swayed. It was hers. I could feel it in my skin. That same evening, the university wrote, "Due to an anonymous complaint, your application has been suspended pending clarification of the circumstances." I reread those words dozens of times until they lost their meaning. I wanted to scream, but I didn't even have a voice. At home, I tried to talk to my parents. "It's not true," I said. "Someone just..." "Emily," my mother interrupted, "if you did something, it's better to admit it. We'll work it out." "I didn't do anything. We just want to help." Their eyes were a mixture of confusion and fatigue. They didn't believe me. But they didn't argue either. That's the worst thing, when they don't take away your truth, but simply turn away from it. The next day, I sat in the library, looking through old drafts, trying to find some kind of evidence. And then Mrs. Nelson approached me. "Listen," she said quietly. I checked the time that complaint was sent. It was sent from the account helpforally@gmail.com. I looked up. "Are you sure?" "Unfortunately, yes." I didn't want to believe it at first, but there are too many coincidences. I sat there, motionless. This was the first time someone had seen what I saw. "Don't say I told you," she added. "Just keep it to yourself." You're smart. Make a copy. When I left the library, I finally felt something in my chest, not relief, no. It was called finally, someone believes me. I didn't sleep much that night. I looked through her page, searching for clues. And I found it, the same photo with the diploma on her phone, cropped the same way as in the gossip post. I took a screenshot. I saved several copies. In the morning, I brought a flash drive to school and showed it to Ms. Nelson. She was silent for a long time, then said, "This is no longer a joke. You have to defend yourself." "How?" "Not on your own. I know someone, a lawyer. She understands these cases." "Your Aunt Joan, right?" "I saw her at the parent-teacher conference." That was when I first remembered that I had a relative who always said, "The truth doesn't disappear if you write it down." I took out my phone and wrote a short message. "Aunt Joan, I need help. And I already have proof." I pressed send and felt a spark inside me for the first time in many months. Not hope, fighting spirit. After that night, I stopped waiting for someone to take my word for it. I decided to take action. No emotions. No drama. Just facts. I bought a regular notebook, cheap, with a soft cover. On the first page, I wrote, "Log of Lies." And every day I made notes, the date, the time, what Haley said, where she went, what she posted on social media, what symptoms she mentioned. After a week, the pages were already filled with small handwriting. And a pattern emerged. On the days when she was undergoing treatment, photos from cafes, shopping malls, and movie theaters appeared on her profile. I took screenshots, saved them in the cloud, and duplicated them on a flash drive. The second step was the documents. I asked my mother to show me the certificates to understand the diagnosis. She brought a folder. I looked at it, pretending to be just curious, but in fact I was recording everything. The absence of barcodes, identical fonts, signatures without seals. When my mother went to the kitchen, I photographed the pages. Later, I checked the dates on the clinic's website. Some of the documents were dated on weekends, days when the hospital was not working at all. One small detail, and her whole story began to unravel. I bought a small voice recorder, similar to a flash drive. I placed it behind a photo frame opposite her door. At first, there was silence. Footsteps, the TV, my mother's voice. But on the 8th day, I heard her. They really believed it. They didn't even check with the doctor. Then, quiet laughter. If I had known it was so easy, I would have started earlier. I sat with my headphones on and listened to it several times. It was her voice. Her intonation. Her phrases. I saved the file in 3 places, on a flash drive, in the cloud, and on an old phone that is no longer connected to the network. After that, I started placing the recorder in different rooms. And each time, a little more truth came out. She thinks her university is still waiting for her. And I'm just going to ruin her reputation. No one will believe this perfect straight-A student. She'll go crazy. I transcribed the recordings, dated them, and added short notes, "Mom at home, evening, tone, calm." It felt like I was conducting my own investigation in a case where the prosecutor, witness, and victim were all the same person. And then I dialed Aunt Joan's number. She answered right away, as if she had been waiting. "Emily?" "Yes, it's me. I need help." She was silent for a few seconds, then said firmly, "Finally. Tell me everything you remember." I spoke almost without pause. About the illness, the fake medical certificates, the spoiled documents, the recordings. She didn't interrupt. She only asked once. "Are you sure it's her voice?" "Yes. Absolutely." "Okay. I'll come on Saturday. But don't say a word to anyone. Not even your parents." On Saturday, she showed up, calm as always, with a homemade casserole and a smile that hid a cold confidence. She hugged my mom, praised the tidiness of the house, and asked Haley how she was feeling. Haley gushed with gratitude, as if she had just received an award. And then my aunt said, "Emily, will you show me your room? I want to help you sort out your books." My mother just waved her hand. Yes, of course. We went upstairs and closed the door. I showed her everything: notes, flash drives, screenshots, photos of references. She listened attentively, looked through everything, and nodded from time to time. "This is no longer just jealousy," she said finally. "This is systemic manipulation. But you have to prove it competently. Without hysterics. Otherwise, you'll lose everything." We sat at the laptop for hours. She helped me organize the materials by date and wrote down all the inconsistencies in the medical documents. "Look," she pointed to the screen, "even the diagnosis code is made up. There's no such thing in the international classification. She just made it up." After several hours of work, she said, "Tonight we'll do a little test. Ask your parents to get everyone together. I'll pretend I came to support Haley. But I'll ask a few questions. If she gets confused, we'll expose her." I felt scared, but at the same time calm. For the first time in many months, I knew that everything was going according to our plan, not hers. That evening, I helped my mom cut vegetables, my hands trembling slightly. But inside, I had a feeling that something had finally changed. Not revenge, justice. We sat down at the table. Haley looked perfect, calm, gentle, with a blanket over her shoulders and that same tired smile that used to drive everyone crazy. She didn't know that this time the show would have a different ending. The evening began as usual. Mom served dinner, Dad opened a bottle of wine in honor of Aunt Joan. Haley sat at the center of the table, in a soft sweater, with a blanket on her knees, holding her glass with both hands, as if afraid to drop it. From the outside, it was a perfect picture of care. Joan spoke easily, as if she were simply curious. "Haley, I admire your resilience," she said warmly. "It's scary when your body starts to betray you." "Yes, it can be difficult," Haley sighed. "But I'm holding on." "Which clinic are you being treated at?" Joan asked. "I have a doctor friend who might be able to help with some advice." "A private one." "Small, but very modern." "Medline." "Medline," her aunt repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't it close 2 years ago?" Mom froze. Dad raised his head. "Maybe I'm confusing something," Haley hastened to add. "I think they have a different name now." "Oh, I see," Joan said casually. "And the doctor who's treating you is Dr. Mason, I believe?" "Yes," Haley nodded. "Interesting. I know him personally. He works at a completely different clinic." Haley put down her fork. Her smile froze. Mom tried to change the subject. "Maybe we shouldn't talk about hospitals at the table?" But Joan calmly took a folder out of her bag. "Sorry, I'd just like to keep my documents in order. I thought I'd help you sort things out." She opened the folder and placed several sheets of paper on the table. "Here's a reference from Medline. But the stamp is from Sunville Medical. And here is Dr. Mason's signature, which, by the way, is identical to the one circulating on the internet." "Interesting, isn't it?" Haley froze. "Are you accusing me?" Her voice became hollow. "I'm just asking," Joan replied calmly. "Maybe you can explain?" Haley stood up abruptly. "It's a lie. She faked it all." She pointed at me. "She hates me." "Enough," Mom said quietly. "Tell me honestly, sweetie. Is that your signature?" "No." Then Joan took out her phone and pressed play. A familiar voice came from the speaker. They really believed it. They didn't even check with the doctor. If I had known it was so easy, I would have started earlier. The silence after that sound was unbearable. Mom covered her mouth with her hand. Dad stared, not blinking. "It's fake." Haley shouted. "She edited it." "Emily," Mom whispered, "is it true?" Yes, I replied. It's her voice. Haley took a step toward me. Shut up, she yelled and pushed the plate, which fell and shattered on the floor. Dad got up and tried to hold her back, but she struggled. You all love her more, she cried through her tears. You don't even notice that I exist. She grabbed a glass and threw it at me. The glass shattered, and water spilled onto the floor. Mom gasped, and Joan was already dialing 911. You ruined my life. Haley shouted as Dad held her back. I stood motionless. I didn't even try to defend myself. Because I suddenly realized this wasn't a victory. It was the end. As the paramedics carried her out of the house, she was still shouting something about setups and betrayal. Mom sat at the table, clutching the hand she had scratched. Dad stood by the door, watching the ambulance lights disappear around the corner. I cleaned up the broken glass, wiped up the water, and sighed for the first time in a long time. Not out of joy, but out of silence. Real, not fake. Joan put her hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Now give them time to understand. I nodded. It was dark outside, but inside it was a little lighter. Not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped the endless madness. When the ambulance door closed, the house felt strangely empty. Not silent, but empty. Like after a fire, everything is in its place, but nothing warms you anymore. Mom sat in the kitchen, holding a cup she never brought to her mouth. Dad was silent, just staring out the window. Joan was gathering documents, carefully putting the sheets back into the folder. Everyone was busy with their own things so they wouldn't have to look each other in the eye. She'll be under observation for a few days, my aunt finally said. She needs to be examined and rest. Is she sick? My mother asked quietly. Yes, but not in the way you thought. I couldn't help myself. She made it all up. Emily, Joan stopped me, now is not the time for she and I. This is a family. And we all have to accept that we have been living a lie. Mom started to cry. Quietly, silently. I sat next to her, but didn't know what to say. Because inside, I had a strange feeling, not revenge, not anger, not even relief. Just exhaustion. The kind that weighs on your shoulders and makes it hard to breathe. I couldn't sleep that night. Her words kept running through my head. You love her more. You don't even notice that I exist. And for the first time, I didn't feel hatred. Only pity. Maybe deep down, it wasn't just anger, but despair. Maybe she wanted to be heard at last, at any cost. Even this. The next day, Mom didn't leave her room. Dad went to the hospital and came back late in the evening. She's stable, he said briefly. But she won't admit anything. She says it's all a setup against her. What now? I asked. I don't know, Emily. For the first time in my life, I don't know what to do. Those few days we lived as if in a surveillance camera. No talk of the future, no phone calls. Just everyday life, washing dishes, doing laundry, cooking. Everything was done mechanically. But on the fourth day, my mother knocked on my door. She said, I found your notes. And an envelope from the university. She handed it to me. We contacted the admissions committee. They reviewed the case. Everything is fine. You are officially accepted. I sat there holding the envelope, not knowing whether to cry or laugh. Everything I had fought for suddenly became real again. And at the same time, so distant. We're proud of you, my mom said, squeezing my hands. And I'm sorry. We just didn't want to see the truth. Because then we would have had to change something. I will remember those words forever. They were honest, painful, real. Later that evening, I went into Haley's room. On her desk was an empty frame that once held a photo of us together. I put another one in it, from childhood. We were both still small, smiling, holding hands. I didn't know if she would ever come home. But I wanted her to see this photo first if she did. When I stepped out onto the porch, the sky was already pink and gray. Quiet and calm, like after a storm. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe deeply. Several months passed. I was already studying at university. A new campus, new people, a new life, but sometimes the same sound still echoed in my head. The sound of a glass breaking on the floor. I didn't tell anyone. About my sister, about home, about everything I left behind. When people ask about my family, I say briefly, we have a complicated history. And that's enough. One autumn evening, my mother wrote to me. Haley is coming home. Temporarily. After treatment. We're trying to start over. I read the message for a few minutes before replying. Okay. How is she? Calm. Different. A week later, I arrived. The house looked the same, but the air inside was different. Without that tension, without that constant expectation of an explosion. Haley was sitting on the porch. Thin, pale, but truly calm. When she saw me, she stood up. Hi. Hi. We were silent. Then she said. I remember everything. But I don't know why I did it. I don't know either, I replied. And I don't think I want to look for explanations anymore. She nodded and lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. We stood side by side, like two people who once shared a life and now had simply learned to breathe the same air. Without love, without hate, just silence between us. In the evening, my mother showed me an old photo album. The same childhood pictures, us on the beach, us in Halloween costumes, us under the Christmas tree with shiny bows. I used to be unable to look at these photos, they seemed fake, like a scene from an old commercial. But that evening, I noticed something else. Our laughter looked real. We were truly happy, even if only for a second, even if only once. And that was enough to forgive the past. Before going to bed, I went to her room. The door was ajar. She was asleep, holding the same frame with our childhood photo in her hands. I quietly closed the door. In the kitchen, the old refrigerator flashed, with my university envelope still hanging on it. And for the first time, it didn't seem like a reminder of struggle to me. Rather, it was proof that even from the deepest darkness, you can grow. Because sometimes victory is not about proving that you are right. It is simply about surviving, preserving yourself, and learning to laugh again.